In the energy space, there's one thing. In the AI tech space, there's another, right? And I think that the sort of way I would approach it is slightly different. But let's just talk about the AI space, for example, and sort of we want, communities to feel empowered, that people don't feel like they're just giving up agency. And a lot of the current AI policy debates across the country are very real efforts to empower state policymakers to shape the tech in a way that, quote unquote, protects the community. That's really a big part of those conversations. And I would say the best way to empower these communities is to actually see as many of these companies, startups, small startups, flourish as much as possible, and embrace sort of the competitive process that occurs.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. If you're watching, you can see that we're on the road and we're recording from the State Policy Network annual meeting. If you haven't heard of SPN, their mission is to help state organizations put free market ideas and local solutions into action. What makes it great for us is that we get to sit down with people to see what they are working on. And today we're talking with someone who focuses on technology. Lately, you've probably noticed more talk about data centers popping up in communities across the country. These massive facilities are the backbone of the digital world and the rise of AI, but they also raise some big questions, especially about the strain they put on the systems we all rely on. And it's not just about how these centers operate, it's also about making sure Americans don't face interruptions to the things they depend on every day. To meet the power demand, some have started looking at nuclear as part of that solution. But of course, that opens up a whole new conversation. And that's where today's guest comes in. He's been at the forefront of helping communities and innovators and policymakers think through how emerging technologies can grow without leaving people behind. I want to welcome Chris Koopman, who's the CEO of the Abundance Institute, to the podcast. I want to welcome him back to the podcast, in fact. So I know that you were with us. Welcome, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I know that when you guys were just starting up, you joined the podcast. And so last time we talked, you just launched. So how's things been going?
Things are going really, really well. And I think you think back to when we launched the Abundance Institute, we were launching in sort of the final year of the Biden administration. There was, at the time, sort of an all-of-government approach to stopping, slowing down, bottling up AI. There were very real conversations about what the future of our energy system would look like, and it was a very stark difference from our vision of what the future will be. And so it's been really refreshing to see the change in the conversation from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, and to especially see a lot of our ideas that we thought we were sort of tilting at windmills or just yelling into the ether and no one was listening, to finally see some of our ideas become a reality and to become centerpieces of national policy in energy and in AI.
Amazing. Well, I think, one of the things at AFP we always talk about, we work on policy and in politics, and, it is a great reminder that, who we elect and the administration that comes in really matters. There are different ideas and how things, and it opens the door. And but before we get to that, because I think there are some really exciting things going on, tell us about what the Abundance Institute works on. What do you guys focus on?
Yeah, so the way I like to think about the Abundance Institute, if I were to give you my one sentence pitch on what we are, I would say that the easiest...
it's a podcast. You can go way longer than...
I can go way longer, but we'll start short and we'll go any direction you want. The way I like to think about Abundance is we're nonprofit public affairs and government relations for the startups that haven't launched, the founders that haven't been born, and the industries you've never even dreamt of. Oftentimes, the policy conversations just completely ignore the future, and the future doesn't get a seat at the table. And we see this all the time. You and I, in our work in policy, are constantly dealing with decisions that were made 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even 70 years ago that now you look back and you realize just how wrong we were at the time. And our goal is to try to create space for emerging tech today to make sure that we don't continue to make the same mistakes over and over by building a regulatory system that's just a snapshot or a Polaroid picture of the moment, rather than trying to incorporate considerations of what the dynamic future really is going to entail. So that's what we're up to. Now, when we launched a year and a half ago, we were focused on AI and energy, and I always thought of them as two separate issues. That the AI stuff was really, an area, and the energy stuff was really an area. And if you would have asked me then, and I told people then, I may have even said this on the podcast last time I was on, at some point in the future, I would have said a year and a half ago, some point in the future, maybe 5 years, energy becomes the biggest issue in AI, and AI becomes the biggest issue in energy. There's a moment when that would occur. I didn't think it would be 12 months later. I certainly didn't think within a year of me saying that I would be that wrong, but this is what tech does. It condenses timelines. So we've been working hard on unleashing energy abundance. We've been working hard on protecting the dynamic AI ecosystem we have. Now it just turns out the two are colliding and are growing hand in hand.
So we've had a lot of energy producers on the show over the last 6 months, CEO of the biggest coal company, CEO of the biggest natural gas company, and a number of different people involved in energy production. And they all talk about data centers and the energy that's necessary for data centers, for AI. Talk about that. What's the reality that's emerged and is going to continue to ramp up?
Yeah. So I think, maybe let's just start about like data center. Like, I think most people, when they talk about data centers now, almost exclusively think that this is just for AI.
Yeah.
Right. That this is just how we're building these AI systems or these massive data centers. But as you said in the introduction, this is the backbone of our modern economy. Our modern economy is primarily built, fueled by the internet. Mm-hmm. And the internet is not some magical place. It literally the data that you are generating, your pictures, your files, everything, like all of your kids' pictures, the files you use in your work, your medical records, all of that stuff has to be stored somewhere. It just doesn't exist in the ether. It's right. Somewhere, and that's really what most of these data centers are. It is sort of storing all the data we're generating every day. Now the AI hyperscalers, right, are realizing you need massive amounts of compute, right, just to train the next model. That's mostly what a lot of these data centers are doing. It's just being run 24/7 to train the next model or to continue to train the models that they have. And so there's massive energy, right? It's one thing to just run these data centers and you're just keeping them cool, you're storing the data, you're making sure that when they're called on, the data's available. It's another thing running these massive data centers that are being used for training AI, which is now a key part of the build out of all these data centers. And it's a massive demand shock to our energy system. Like there's a ton of energy is going to be needed. In Utah, for example, I've seen plans for data center campuses that are 30 gigs, right? 30 gigawatts of energy, which is like, orders of magnitude more than what the entire state uses in a year.
Really?
Right. So yes. And you think like the backlog of projects that could be added to the grid exceeds the capacity that we have to support all the projects we currently have on the grid. So we have this massive backlog of just development, just not just AI data centers, factories, homes, businesses, all sorts of things that people want to build and get onto the grid, that the biggest bottleneck now is getting them plugged in. And the biggest challenge to that is making sure we have the supply of electricity to meet it. And it is a tremendous challenge to meet that demand with adequate supply, running everything on the set of rules we have put in place.
How big of a concern is it of yours that we can't meet it, or that the infrastructure falls apart, or like that this takes a bad turn, or is poor. It makes something not work for us economically. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think the dangers are here?
Yeah, so I think I would break it down into sort of a couple of sort of threats to meeting this. And I think obviously every opportunity in history that America has been given to rise to the occasion and be the key driver of industrial progress, we have. America has a history of meeting and leading in every aspect for the last 250 years, right? This is the first time I think you can see a concerted and broad conversation of people. We're on the precipice of a new industrial revolution with AI. And I think this is the first time you're seeing policymakers in America unwilling to meet the challenge and say, we're good. No, we don't. Why would we want that in our state? Why would we want that in our town?
And is that policymakers not wanting the centers to locate in their state or town?
Yeah. Yes. I think it's a couple of things. I think it's people saying like we don't have the supply to meet that demand, and you're forcing us to make trade-offs between data center and grandma's AC, right? And we're not willing to make that trade-off. So take your data center somewhere else. I think there's a real challenge there for America, right? So there's sort of this intellectual problem we have or vision problem we have where people are sort of like, we've grown enough. We're okay. Let somebody else handle this. Our job is to manage the orderly decline of our current system and let someone else deal with the tough questions around data centers in the 21st century. So there's that problem. Then you have the second problem, which is there are people who want them that would more than happily welcome these data centers into their states. They see them as the backbone of the modern economy. They are going to be massive pieces of the future. They're going to create jobs. They're going to create opportunity in the state. But they don't have the bandwidth to expand their generation fast enough, their electricity generation fast enough to meet the demand. So I think there's like two things happening at once. There's like the people who are just fine taking a pass, and then there are people that really want to welcome this, usher in this new industrial revolution, and then are basically caught in a position where policies made 30, 40, 50, like I said, 70 years ago are dictating what we can and can't do in 2025.
Wow. So AI driving a lot of demand, but not, I think you've been pretty clear that just our use, how we use the internet and the scale that it keeps growing at requires a lot of capacity already, but AI is only driving a lot more of that. Do you feel like we have the infrastructure in place? And like, what do we need to do to get to a place where we can not really hamstring that growth that we want to see?
Yeah. So, no.
Okay.
I don't think we're in a place right now currently. Like, obviously we're not, because there are these very real conversations happening around the country of people being like, we can't do it. Right. And tech companies are shopping around trying to figure out where can we place them. You have Louisiana, who's putting in a $10 billion data center. You have other states that are saying go away. But I would say to make it, we need to make it easier to build. Right. And we need to make it easier for people to experiment with new ways of building and meeting the demand. So I'll give you two examples. Like right now, if you wanted to build out new generation and bring it onto the grid, build out transmission, we're talking years and years of process, right? Not just the building, but years of process where people are going to sue you and say you didn't take into account all of the environmental impacts. People are going to say, the agency or the state or whatever rushed to approve a project, and now we have to rethink it. It's going to get locked up in court. You see this happening all over the place. This is sort of the MO of environmentalists over the last 30 years, is to use environmental law to stop progress. You're seeing it come come to light in the build out of data centers and the build out of our electricity grid. So you have that problem. Like, we just need to make it easier to build. We need to get faster yeses, and then we need to make sure that those yeses stay yeses, and so people can continue to build out the transmission and the generation necessary to continue to grow the American economy. That's on the one side. On the other side, there's a bunch of really unique opportunities to experiment in energy generation, storage, and transmission, but our federal laws and many of our state laws are getting in the way of things like private grids, of things like, alternative arrangements where, you can have a data center that runs on its own generation and isn't plugged in at all. But if the company generating the electricity is selling it to the company consuming it at the data center, using it at the data center, even though they're not on the grid, that's a retail transaction, and now the state gets a say. So now we're in no better position than we were just trying to plug into the grid, because now we have all these rules, we have all of these stakeholders that get an opportunity to slow the process down. And I'm not saying we should, do away with all environmental assessments, but what I'm saying is, like, everyone is in almost near perfect agreement that we've gone way too far. And I think the perfect example of where it's playing out is things like, generating and transmitting electricity. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was huge bipartisan support for this, and under the Biden administration, I think permitting is going to be a huge issue. The remainder of 2025 at the federal level, like, everybody recognizes permitting from Ezra Klein to Thomas Massey, and everyone in between is like, we need permitting reform, and that's a key part of this.
Talking about interesting arrangements. I was in Alaska last week, and I met with a number of elected officials and political people up there. I was talking to one official who had a really interesting idea. They're talking about the need for data centers to be cooled, and that they have a problem with transmitting natural gas. They don't have pipelines yet to take the enormous amounts of natural gas and ship it down the lower 48. They were saying, well, we could just locate some data centers near the natural gas, like way up north, and have the cooling action going on easily there, but also have that source of energy, being the natural gas that can't be transmitted yet, to provide the power. And I was like, whether or not that works or not, or is like the right idea, I just was like, okay, I love the way people are starting to think. I mean, I know there's a ton of innovators in this space who I'm sure have a ton of innovative ideas, and government's trying to block them. Yeah. And I guess that's our job, is to try to stop that and change that environment.
Yeah. And some of this, for as broken as the system is, this is like markets at work.
Yeah.
Right. You have this tremendous demand and sort of pent up, locked down supply. And so you're ending up with these price signals being shot out to innovators all across the country that says, if you can figure out unique ways to solve this problem, there's billions and billions of dollars to be made by fixing that issue of getting electricity to the folks who need it. And so you've got, this is sort of the resurgence of nuclear. Yeah. Is an example of this. And some of these other really unique energy startups in this space are sort of entrepreneurs doing what they do. They're looking at this broken system and say that we can make a lot of money by finding a way around it, building an alternative.
So what is the future for nuclear, do you think? Like, what's the use here? And then so nuclear is always a little problematic, but it's also a pretty phenomenal source.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of and this is sort of why, if you think, as we dig into like why abundance, like the Abundance Institute, what are we doing? I think, and energy is a perfect example of sort of our, like, why our vision is important here is there's a tremendous opportunity in sort of the emerging tech space, in particular in small modular reactors, advanced reactors. Like, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here, high potential. But cultural misconceptions, pessimism, and misunderstanding are just fraught in this space right now. So you think, like, people are like, nuclear is dangerous, nuclear is unsafe, nuclear, there are problems with this. And it's like, well, the story you've been told is not the world as it is.
Right.
And and you think nuclear is a tremendously safe source of energy. These advanced reactors are both, by virtue of the physics and the passive safety and designs and everything involved, they're practically meltdown proof. And even in the instances in which, like, worst case scenarios, the exposure is no more than like a CT scan or an MRI, right? So we have this tremendous opportunity, but it's just sort of like locked in pessimism, fear, and then old laws, right? And this is where sort of our work has been in this is you have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, created in the early 1970s to make nuclear safe. And they achieved their mission to make nuclear safe because no nuclear plant for 50 years was built. That's how you make it safe, right?
Yeah,
like you give an agency a mandate of like making something safe and they're like, we did it. Mission accomplished. And we got no new nuclear for something like 50 years. Well, what we've realized is, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't actually have the full jurisdiction that it claims, and that potentially there is an entire class of reactors that, by virtue of their design and the amount of nuclear material that they use, do not pose a health and safety risk in the way that Congress had intended the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to regulate, and may actually fall back to the states to start to take a more active role in permitting nuclear power, especially these small reactors. We're talking small reactors. So there's a lawsuit right now. Texas, Louisiana, Florida, Arizona, and Utah have joined up with 3 nuclear startups and said the NRC has claimed jurisdiction it doesn't have. It's taken power away from the states to make this decision that Congress intended to be left to us, and we want it back. And so because of recent Supreme Court decisions in Loper Bright and Corner Post and sort of the change in sort of the way that the Supreme Court is approaching questions of agency discretion, the states think they have a really good shot of sort of getting a say again and potentially unlocking nuclear for America. You think like those 5 states, if they start building out America, they're building out nuclear, that is a massive boon to a huge population across the country.
And I mean, those states are have led the way on a lot of really good policy across the board.
Yep.
So that's super exciting. That's really exciting. Sorry. So what's in your mind, what's the one thing policymakers and communities need to look at it if we want innovation to flourish, but still have trust from the communities? Like what can happen so that they can kind of occur side by side?
Yeah. I mean, in the energy space, there's one thing. In the AI tech space, there's another, right? And I think that the sort of way I would approach it is slightly different. But let's just talk about the AI space, for example, and sort of we want communities to feel empowered, that people don't feel like they're just giving up agency. And a lot of the current AI policy debates across the country are very real efforts to empower state policymakers to shape the tech in a way that, quote unquote, protects the community. That's really a big part of those conversations. And I would say the best way to empower these communities is to actually see as many of these companies, startups, small startups, flourish as much as possible, and embrace sort of the competitive process that occurs in this fierce competition in AI right now. And in particular, defend the open source ecosystem, right? So Meta, Grok, OpenAI, they're all starting to release their models so you can kind of see under the hood and see what's there. And I think in the AI context, that's where we're really going to see this sort of like community empowerment, that people in far-flung places away from San Francisco feel like they actually do have some control in their lives, that they haven't given it all up to these AI systems built by people that live far away, that view the world in a way they might not view it the same way. So I think like in that case, if you like, 3 or 4 companies or 1 or 2 companies shaping all of this technology and you not having a choice in who you do business with when it comes to these things as they sort of continue to proliferate across the economy, you do want very heavy centralized control of this. This was the Biden administration's effort in AI, was they were basically like, we're going to regulate the system so there's one or two players and we will work very closely with them to shape that. That's not the way that people in Omaha or Salt Lake City or Indianapolis get a say in this. The way they get a say in this is by having choice. And the way that you encourage choice is by allowing as many options as possible that the market can sustain. And so I think in the AI space, like remembering that, there's more than one way to regulate. Consumers regulate things all the time with the choices they make with whom to do business. And that's really the way that we see regulation in this space. In the energy space, I think it's allowing localities, states, to choose the energy system, if you want to think about it, that's right for them, right? Just because it's really windy in Oklahoma and wind works really well in tandem with natural gas to provide electricity in Oklahoma does not mean wind is the right answer for everyone, just in the same way that it's really sunny in Salt Lake City. But I wouldn't expect Chicago or Springfield, Illinois, to embrace solar the way that Arizona, Phoenix, Salt Lake, and Utah have. And I think allowing states to have much more power to make those decisions with the federal government stepping away and not forcing, through subsidies or through regulation, forcing states' hands down a particular path and saying, we know that natural gas is important and reliable and affordable, but we want you to go a different way. I think the more that those decisions can be made by people knowing the natural resources they have and the best way to provide the electricity they need is the way I think you balance that innovative space, both in AI and in energy, but then also empower communities and individuals to make choices that are right for them.
Yeah, imagine that. Bottom-up solutions, potentially.
Yeah, you said, look, I meandered around for a while. You got it in one-liner. That's why you run a podcast and I don't. So.
No, not at all. Well, there's a lot of other reasons why you're running an institute and I'm not. Oh, Chris, thank you so much. Hey, if people want to find out about the Abundance Institute and all the work you're doing, is there a good place for them to go?
Yeah, so I would say abundance.institute is the easiest place to find everything out. But I would also really encourage people to go check us out on YouTube. We've produced a ton of content that is meant for everyday people to sort of engage in these cutting edge startups and see some of these issues in really approachable, easy to consume formats.
That's great. I mean, it's so exciting about what's going on in America, and there's always exciting, cool things going on, and innovators doing all kinds of great stuff. But so often, like you said, the regulatory structure and the laws that we have decades ago are inhibiting that. And so I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing, often as partners to us, but really leading the way to help change that regimen so that we can actually unleash folks to make, to just be Americans, innovate, create great value, and make people's lives better. So thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Well, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, please be sure to like and subscribe our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.